Realistic songwriting.
As an artist, one of the biggest challenges you're facing is coming up with songs that are different from everything you've written before. You don't want to bore your audience by rewriting the same song over and over, but at the same time, you want to keep your sound consistent. You don't want to randomly switch genres or instrumentation, so it can be hard to come up with enough ideas for your sound. And yet, people still write albums that aren't boring or all over the place. How do they do that? In this series, I want to show you how I wrote my 15-song concept album, Only the Good Things, and we'll also look at my first album, Subface. I've paid a lot of attention to giving my listeners a different experience for each song, and I want to show you how I did that, so you can too. With each video in this series, I want to give you a new kind of song. Each song blueprint is a sort of formula for creating material that is the same, but different. In other words, this series will show you how to get more out of your unique sound. And you don't have to write an album to use these. When I'm called to a writing session for another artist, I take a listen to their back catalog and categorize their previous songs. And then I think about which song types they're lacking. Those are the songs I'm going to write. Today, we're starting with our first song blueprint, the opener. This is the first track on your record. You might also call it your opening image. The first thing that plays when you go on stage. In this video, I will reference two of my own openers a lot, so I recommend you check them out. Experience them before we analyze them so you understand what we're working towards. The songs are here on YouTube and the links are in the description. Give them a go and then come back here. All of this will make a lot more sense if you know what we're talking about, and it'll make remembering these concepts a lot easier. So, what are you trying to do with your opener? Let's begin. The opener creates a sonic identity for what your listener is about to hear. Your opener should foreshadow what your listener can expect from you. Behavioral science tells us that the order in which we are presented with pieces of information matters greatly. For example, when evaluating candidates for a job interview, you might find that the first trait mentioned about each candidate has a disproportionately large influence on your overall impression of them. This is known as the primacy effect. Whatever you put first on your record or in your show will influence how your listener experiences every single song that comes after. So if your opener doesn't do a good job of framing what you have to offer, that's a problem. You want to avoid this by picking sounds and making musical choices that match the vibe of the rest of your music. For example, on Subface, I use a variety of distorted sounds. There's tremolos and glitches, and I automated the format of the vocals, which gives it a kind of horror vibe. Distorted bass synths come in, there's a dark wobbling sound like a hastened heartbeat, and the overall tone is uncomfortable and tense. Only the Good Things starts with the dial tone of a phone. Because it is a concept album that tells a story, I wanted it to open much more visually than Subface, and there's no better way to make you visualize something than by giving you a sound you already know. When you hear that dial tone, it's impossible not to conjure up images or memories. And phone calls play a vital part in my story. The song title, Dial In, says it all. It tells you you're about to go on a journey, but you have to be dialed in first. Then the bass comes in, and it's the meanest, darkest bass you could imagine, playing a mean, dark riff. It sounds oppressive, like it's trying to beat you into submission. And it is, because that's how I felt. Look at System of a Down's Prison Song. What does that foreshadow? Well, it punches in with those almost random guitar hits at no particular tempo out of nowhere. That tells you that you were not prepared for what this band has in store for you. It's going to be a chaotic ride. The opener holds back. Your opener doesn't have to give away what you sound like. In fact, it probably shouldn't. You want to foreshadow, to create suspense, to hint at what's to come, to make your listeners' synapses fire. You don't want them entirely satisfied. You want them to look forward to what you have to offer, to be interested and engaged. A good opener isn't necessarily a great song in itself. Its purpose is to make the second song hit harder. This is why a lot of openers don't use the same instrumentation as the rest of the album. It holds off on the band sound just a little longer to build up your expectations. And by the way, when I say band sound, that obviously goes for electronic albums too. The intro to Subface is the only song on the record that uses synthesizers, and it takes a while for the band to come in. Dial in takes more than a minute before the first guitars come in, and almost 3.5 minutes before we hear the full band sound. A lot of artists use orchestras for their openers or soundscapes. NF's The Search comes to mind. But you can do anything. Just make sure that you're picking sounds that match the vibe of your other music. You don't want a lush orchestral arrangement followed by an hour of headbanging metal tracks. It's not just a cliche, it's bad writing. I'm not saying you can't use an orchestra, but make it sound metal. Distort those cellos and let them play power chords. Use chord progressions you would actually use in your music. Give us an idea of what you stand for. Use the opportunity to introduce each member of your band or each sound in your arsenal. Think of the opener as the opening montage of an 80s TV show portraying all the characters. And you want to pay special attention to the vocals. Give us a hint of what the vocals will sound like, but don't give us the real thing yet. That's why I start Subface with distorted speech. Arlo Parks starts her record Collapsed in Sunbeams not by singing, but by reading out a poem. Prison Song has Serj Tankian whispering the first few lines. In all of these, the voice is hinted at, but we're not getting the full vocal sound just yet. The opener builds tension. Start small. Do it like a good movie and slowly turn up the heat. Think long term. You're moving towards something and it's going to blow everyone's socks off. The intro to my first album is literally just one big crescendo. For about a minute, more and more instruments are introduced, all building towards the second song on the track list. Dial In from my second record is a song in itself and it provides its own payoff at the end, but it builds up to that over a long period of time. It creates a lot of suspense over its 5-minute runtime. And when it ends, it doesn't end on a home chord. It leaves you hanging in midair. Lyrically, Dial In starts like this. Sitting in my car, play metal at full blast with an expressionless face. Heavy in my hand, a call from my old man, drained all the blood from my cheeks. There's an unanswered question here, which creates suspense. It's a striking image that draws us in and we want to know more. We continue with, we don't talk much on the way to chemo. Then again, we never did. Which characterizes my relationship with my dad and almost accidentally drops that word. Why am I not making a bigger deal out of it? It feels off, and again, that creates suspense. Now, do I reveal what's going on later in the song? No, of course not. That's not what we do in the opener. That would dispel all that beautiful suspense way too quickly. Here's the chorus. Come inside, share my destination for a while. There's plenty frustration for the both of us. I'm basically saying something happened, come join me and I'll tell you all about it. You've just opened a door and there's another door behind it. The opener sets the stage. Your opener provides your listener with easy entry into your universe. It's not overwhelming, it starts small and comfortable. Again, think crescendo. Pick up your listener where they're at. This is the first they're hearing of you. You're not trying to wow them right away. Give them easy access. On Subface, I start with the sound of an electric guitar that I ran through a tremolo, like a machine kicking into gear. Only the Good Things starts with the dial tone of a phone. Both songs take a while before they turn into something resembling music. And that's intentional. I want my album to start in an iconic way with a new sound you haven't heard before. It's almost more like an audio logo or a trailer. It captures the entire experience of the record in a few seconds. Subface is a burst of energy kind of album, so its opener is short and builds quickly. This was a very tight album, pumped full of action, so that's what makes sense here. Only the Good Things, on the other hand, is an hour-long record with 15 songs. I don't want to wear you out too quickly. I need to slowly ease you into this world I'm creating. So Dial In takes its time. The tempo is slow, the dial tone goes on for a bit, and when the bass comes in, it's the only thing playing for a whopping 30 seconds. Just quarter notes and only 2 pitches. It's dull, and it's meant to be. It's my way of saying, calm down. This is gonna take a while. It sets expectations. It lets you know that I'm taking my time with this album, and you should too. If you're into horror movies, this is more Hereditary than Evil Dead Rise. I'm worming my way into your head, slowly tightening the noose. To come back to Arlo Parks, again, she starts her album by reading a poem. It lets you know that you're in for a relaxed intellectual experience. The opener tells your listener where you're at. We'll talk about this in full when we discuss the image track, but the idea is to introduce yourself, or if they already know about you, to give an update on where you are in your life. Your listener might have never heard of you before, so you want to give them a tour of the cornerstones of your personality. For my first album, I introduced myself through that little speech I gave. Here's what it says. It feels like you're exploding creatively, like you've been working in an office for the last 10 years and you've suppressed your artistic instincts. And now you're like, you know what? I used to really love making music. I'm gonna make an album. And you're like a volcano, you're just erupting with ideas. On the song, this is barely intelligible, and that's mostly due to the fact that I was nervous about sounding like I was boasting. That's actually a recording of me giving feedback to a student at the academy. It just so happened to ring true for my life situation back then as well. I could have re-recorded it, but this is the actual moment when I came up with my artist name, Canohead, short for Volcano Head. I had the recording, and that was too cool not to use. So even though I could have done a better job in terms of intelligibility, I'm telling my listener, this is who I am. Back then, I'd spent a lot of time building up holistic songwriting, and I had to cut back on my own career to do that, but I still had tons of ideas popping up in my head. So when I made this album, it was like a volcanic eruption of creativity. Only the good things was quite different. I wrote that album because I needed to process trauma. I still felt that eruption of creativity, but the circumstances were different. And I think my listeners should know that. Specifically, they should know that this was not going to be filled with the energy and swagger of someone rediscovering their artistry. So for Dial In, I'm not introducing myself. I'm updating the listener on what's been going on since I made my first record. And I'm quite literal with it. Wanna spill my guts, give you the album you want, but I'm just so damn tired from this year. With all my tanks run dry here, I got no energy for another subphase. This explains why the album starts off slow and brooding. You understand that things will pick up and I will eventually tell you what happened, but I don't need to tell you the specifics. All you need to know at this point is the effect these events had on me. So that's the opener. It creates a sonic identity, it holds back, it creates tension, it sets the stage, and it lets your listener know where you're at. There are two images I think of when I'm writing openers to get me into the mood. One is the opening shot from The Dark Knight, which implicitly asks a lot of beautiful questions. And then there's the more general image of what it's like to wait backstage. The audience is chanting your name. It's an important performance that you can't mess up. You're energized and anxious. What's gonna happen? Will you disappoint your fans or win over your doubters? You're panicking. Maybe out there in the audience, your fans feel the same thing. They came all this way and they're anxious for a good time. How can you reflect all this anxiety in a piece of music? Or if high energy is not the right mood, what music could you play that would help you or your audience to calm down? Create something that will help you get into the zone and trust that it will do the same for your audience. For more, check out the Academy. I'm Friedemann Findeisen. Stay gefährlich.